Hey,
everybody.
buddy.
Welcome back to another episode.
I was dropped dugout.
And if you're sitting and you're watching this in video world, you're going to see that we have two guests today. We saw some information come across our desk about some interesting things that 908 is doing. So rather than try to give some information ourselves out, we reached out to them and they were kind enough to take some time to come on and talk to us about some of the things they've got going on.
You know what? I'm going to ask, because Doug's on the left, I'm going to ask him to go first. Tell us who you are.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Doug Huffmaster. I'm here with 908 Devices. I've been here for about 3 years. I'm one of the senior field training specialists. But my background, really, I can't get away from Seaburn, or back in the day, it was NBC when it first started. So I joined the Army a long time ago and spent some time in the 82nd Airborne Division, 1st Ranger Battalion. Was always a chemical guy my whole life. So during the first Gulf War, I spent some time there in the Gulf and did a little bit of Seaburn type operation stuff. And then my Ranger buddy says, "Hey, you're never going to go be a sergeant major in the Army, so you need to get out of the Army and go be a cop in Vegas." I'm like, okay. So I go there. I get hired out of 125 people, 113. So I was even lucky to get hired. So I did my regular patrol stuff and did my problem-solving stuff to be a detective and went to the bureau. After that, of course, 9/11 happened. Started putting together a Homeland Security team, which is a criminal hazmat team here in Vegas called Armor. And so I spent my career there, and that's what I did most of my life. And so that's my background. So that's how I got to 908. And I'm lucky to be here teaching, and I've been teaching the 908 for about the last, like I said, 3 years.
I love it. Dave, what about you?
I didn't get the memo that the only two career options were either sergeant major of the Army or cop in Vegas, so I took a different route. My name is Dave Godin. I'm a senior director of applications at 908 Devices. Before that, I spent 5 years in the U.S. Army as well, although I did not overlap with Doug as an Army chemical officer. Got to do amazing things as part of that job. Ran a forensics lab in Iraq and learned a lot and saw a lot of the value of technology in the hands of responders. So I left the military, got a degree in forensics, and I've been linked up with 908 Devices pretty much ever since, getting tech into the hands at the farthest forward point so that we can make good tactical decisions downrange. That's my kind of goal in life.
You know, it's funny. We talked from different people in different areas, and everybody seems to have like their own things that they did that were just like everyday occurrences for them in their field. So with both of you having that military background, probably a totally different monitoring mission than what we do on a regular basis. What are some of the things that you guys monitored for and looked for in the military?
Yeah, Doug, would you like to take this one?
Sure. So going back to U.S. Army, right, and the first Gulf War, back in the day, we had the Iraqis would fire the Scuds at us that we thought were chemical payloads. And one of the things that we did, we used an IMS device called the M8A1 chemical agent alarm, where we put an array of those devices out in front of us with WD-1 wire, really fancy, right, running back to a squawk box. So when it would alarm, we would actually go to Mach 4, put on our JS-less suit, if you will, our masks, and then they would yell, "Doug, go out there and do the 256 kick."
Oh, no.
So that's what I did. Now, going back to IMS, we all know IMS technology, and the diesel trucks that would drive by, the exhaust, would make this thing alarm anyway. So we did a lot of, whether it was a Scud or whether it was somebody driving a vehicle with exhaust by, going to Mach 4 during that. So and we were monitoring. Our whole point was, chem warfare agent, being able to put on those suits prior to it getting downrange to us. And it was all based on a calculation from the wind speed and direction where that array was at. So
That's great. Well, I know you guys at 908, you guys have always been on the forefront of like doing the whole WMD, and pharmaceuticals and, oh man, what am I? Toxic industrial chemicals, etc. All those things that could be used in a nefarious way. I should have my top hat on when I say that. What are you guys doing now? Because the paperwork that came across our desk is definitely scratching an itch. But what are you guys doing to kind of expand on that?
Right, and I think that's exactly what you referenced. We're always trying to stay a little bit ahead. It's hard to stay too far ahead of clandestine and nefarious actors, but we're always trying to make sure that there are solutions for the things that keep us up at night. Right. And so part of that was, as you said, creating this tool that could do threats that a lot of other things couldn't, being able to do pharmaceutical based agents such as fentanyl at a toxicologically relevant level. And I think last year, or not too far before that, we came on your show and we were talking about the beacon or the Aero module. And that was the ability to expand our monitoring to be able to detect weaponized particulate debris, essentially, right? Aerosolized particulate weapons or threats. And that was pretty groundbreaking for the time. We didn't really have a lot of particulate monitors out there, certainly not something that could identify and perhaps tell you what those particulates were. And so we've been building off of that, essentially, in the last, since we last spoke. And we've now launched this capability of taking that particulate monitor. And the MX908 is inherently a handheld detector, right? It's a person, they're holding it, they're walking into that threat area, they're doing downrange operations, and the detector is telling them what is present and keeping them safe. But as we got into these new threat spaces, we really started butting up against this need to be able to do so in an unmanned capacity, whether that's robots or whether it is, a UAV, or in the case of the beacon, which we'll talk about today, is being able to do this area monitoring task that Tug talked about being able to do with essentially telegraph wires, right? And bringing that into the modern operating technology environment where we can start doing perimeter monitoring and area monitoring and large scale event monitoring for these more modern threats in a more modern way.
Well, I'm guessing since you're expanding to the area, for lack of better words, that the Aero had some pretty good feedback. What were some of the things you saw within the community that people were coming back and being like, hey, this worked great in this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to area monitoring, there's really a couple of things that we wanted to do, and we wanted to make sure that we were covering threats and expanding on an operator's capability, things that we couldn't currently do with our current tech, right? So particularly these aerosolized particulate threats, such as pharmaceutical-based agents or fourth-generation Novichok agents, things of that nature. Right. When we're talking about chemical warfare agents or a lot of nefarious chemicals, we're pretty inherently dispersing them typically as like a weaponized liquid aerosol droplet. Right. But for things that are highly volatile, there's really no difference between an aerosolized liquid droplet and a vapor. But for these more modern threats that are less volatile, there's a huge difference, and a lot of our tech drops off. And so really that's the space that we were focusing on with both the Aero module, as I discussed, and then subsequently the beacon. So it provides the coverage for these modern threats.
And the state of the matter matters, right? This hazmat tech.
Yeah.
And so that Aero,
we want to know.
No, absolutely. The Aero itself, the aerosol, being able to get the answer, because there's not very much tech even available that can do aerosolized threats. And so it brings a whole new ball game to something we couldn't do, because we've been doing liquid solid vapor for a long, long time. We've been trying to figure out what the next asymmetric threat is. We know that these have been used in 18, like the fourth generation nerve has been used in 18 and 20 in Albany and Salisbury. And the next thing is how will that be deployed against us? It's super simple. They're doing it in Europe. Why can't they do it here? And so that's always at the first responder what we're looking at, right? Trying to find out what the next threat is. And that's why we go to all these conferences and spend all this time and spend all this money, right? Trying to make sure that we're protecting everybody we can.
Everyone's being safe.
As well as the first responder.
Yeah. So the MX908 had the capability of detecting and identifying these threats with the Aero module. But to your point, that's fantastic, but it was still a handheld operation, right? And so we were starting to get into these scenarios where we were supporting these large scale events, and we either had to station someone near the detector on the perimeter, or we had to constantly go out and change the batteries, or so we really needed a way of allowing it to operate less as a person-held detector and more as a fixed site monitor. And that really involved creating a way of viewing it and operating the tech remotely it involved creating a communications package, which, as we know from other fixed site monitoring applications, is always a challenge. Always. And then also just increasing that battery time, right? Because oftentimes when we put these out, we won't get the opportunity to wade through the crowds of people enjoying the event to interact with the tech. You really needed to be able to place it out and have it run reliably for the duration of our event without human interaction. So those are the things that we needed to start planning and creating and expanding from the core capabilities of the MX908 with the Aero, and provide through our accessory that we're going to talk about today, which is the beacon.
Well, so you put some wheels on it.
Everything but, sadly. But yes, it is. So essentially, to your point, it is a accessory for the MX908. So any MX908 can be put into this Contico box, essentially, or this cradle. It does have wheels to help you employ it. Also handles, if that's your thing. Has a sort of an integrated lock, so you don't have to provide your own chain, and you can set it up around the perimeter, perhaps, of your fixed site, or monitoring critical infrastructure for your event, like the event stage itself, or the finish line is typically where these things are in place. And then, it provides the battery power and the connectivity and the communications platform to monitor that remotely. So you don't have to have just one of your team constantly looking over and seeing if they're about to die.
Now, with all of that, what would you say a battery life is if I were to sit and deploy this? What are we looking at?
Right. So in our early development, I had the opportunity to work with a bunch of teams who were doing this task. Because in my military career, as you referenced, while we did have a similar need for perimeter security, and I did do a fair amount of civilian clandestine monitoring, I did it more in the capacity of like a plainclothes. So I hadn't have as much experience setting up one of these points and then monitoring it remotely. So I had a great opportunity. A number of agencies were kind enough to let me shadow and learn from them. And one of the things that I universally encountered was that 2 a.m. setup time, right? Where you have to go and monitor, and you have to clear all the event space, the things that Doug did in his capacity. And then you have to set up all of your comms package. And then at some point later, you would employ your devices and turn them on. So that was one of the first things that I didn't want to do, because I didn't want to have to do that either when I'm out operating with our responders. So we built in a huge amount of standby time into the device. So the device or the beacon accessory provides about 16 hours of idle standby time and 8 hours of full operational, although you can cannibalize that standby time for a longer event. So you can either deploy it way in advance and just activate it remotely to initiate during your event, or you can employ it or deploy it closer to the event and get more operational time out of it.
I think that's amazing. Like even 8 hours, like there's not many events that go that long that you can't even walk there to say, all right, let me plug this thing in, or swap out the boxes or whatever the thing is. So like even going back to the Aero, right, which I thought was honestly a huge step forward, because it went from, put the stuff in there, get a sample and be done. It changed to continuous now, which is an enormous upgrade. Going back to that, what was the consensus from the crowd? What were people talking about with that?
I think the reality was they could identify chem warfare agents and pharmaceutical-based agents real time, whether it was vapor or aerosol. And that's a big deal, right? Because,
that was huge.
if we go back to, being able to identify all that Ocean 1910-120 stuff that we have to have for a confined space entry, right? Saying that's good stuff, but it's not giving us answers that when we have something like that. And going back to life safety, incident stabilization, property preservation, all those ICS priorities, right? That's what made it a big deal and a game changer, to be honest with you. Especially knowing what we know. They always call them emerging threats, but they've been around the whole time we've been playing this game, even since I was in the first Gulf War. So I think that's the biggest thing about it.
So chemical warfare agents, great. I think we all pretty much have a good, solid handle on like, okay, what is a chemical warfare agent, how it's going to be used. Can you give a little detail into like pharmaceutical agents? Like, why would a drug be something that I'm concerned of? Like, how do I get a pill to hurt a whole bunch of people?
Fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. So when we're doing any sort of risk assessment when we're planning to mitigate threats. We have to handle sort of the full spectrum of it. Things that are very catastrophic but unlikely, which is most of our traditional chemical warfare agents. Things that are perhaps less catastrophic but far more available, like our TICs and TIMs. Right, they're out there. People can get their hands on them. People can weaponize them. So, they're in that middle ground. But then there are also things that are very available, but also very lethal. And unfortunately, certainly in the domestic U.S., fentanyl falls into that category. Right, It is ubiquitous. It is available. You can amass a large amount of it, either in powder or pill form, and then you can disperse it with nefarious intent. Right, it is very lethal in terms of its ability to cause harm through inhalation, right? I know we went through our response tactics and, we had this big phase where we were very concerned about the cutaneous hazards of fentanyl.
We weren't.
Since as a response community, right, of course, as a response community, we've educated and changed our TTPs, and we know that really the dangers obviously are ingestion, but also inhalation, getting it in through your mucous membranes, things of that nature. So you can certainly disperse fentanyl with weaponized intent into these crowds or into a facility, and it's available and it's quite lethal. And that's just one of those things that we have to think about. Sir, Doug.
Two things with that, right? There's too much of it coming to the United States. We can't ingest all of it. So at some point, sometime, some bad guy is going to figure out he's going to use it, right?
So it's got to get used. If you have it, use it.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I don't have a person who can deliver sarin to my house via the dark web, but I can get fentanyl if I wish to, right? And I think that's really it. So it falls into that bin of very available and still very toxic, and so it's got high weaponization potential. And until as you said, the Aero module, we didn't really have a way of detecting it as it's been dispersed.
How does the aerosol modular, how does it actually work? I know you described it on the last show, but as long as we're talking about it and piggybacking off the beacon, it sucks the fentanyl, and we'll keep going down the fentanyl road. What happens once it enters the magic box?
Yeah.
Right. So it's multi-phase monitoring. So like any vapor-based monitor, it's going to be pulling in air. Ours pulls in a lot, like 5 liters per minute. So we're pulling in a large amount of air. And during that time, we're monitoring for our traditional vapor threats, some TICs, TIMs, chemical warfare agents. But we collect all of the aerosolized particulate threats on a metal mesh. And then every 60 seconds or so, we just heat that mesh, turn all those particulate threats that we've captured into a vapor, and then pull them into the vapor analysis stream of our detector. And that's how it's actually really elegant and simple to turn a vapor detector into that particulate monitor. And that's how we solved that particular problem. So it took us, and it allows us to do multi-phase monitoring in a continuous methodology. And then we expanded on that with the beacon to allow you to do so without having to stand there and look at the detector.
Well, the other thing is with fentanyl, right? Being able to identify fentanyl, the device itself has a classifier. So we all talk about 2,000 analogs of fentanyl. If the backbone's there, it will see it. And that's another crazy big deal, going back to us being hazmat guys, putting suits on, right? Being able to see that at all those different flavors, if you will.
For those people that are not from the hazmat world, but they seem to get put in a position where, holy crap, suddenly I am now leading a hazmat team. Why is the ability to just detect the backbone so important versus detecting every single different type of fentanyl that's out there?
It's really about coverage, right? So if you have a one-for-one reference of a material to its alert or its alarm, you have to have a reference for every single permutation of that threat, which is fine for things that are not very synthetic. But with fentanyl, as we know, it's a synthetic opioid. You can just tweak a lot of different parts of it, and suddenly you have a different compound. As Doug alluded to, just from patent literature, there's over 2,000 analogs of fentanyl. We have a huge problem with this domestically. And despite the fact that we have, a lot of change in our analogs, a lot of different drug supply streams, we've only seen something like 50 to 60 of those analogs on the streets. And it's very hard to get standards, very hard to get references. So you don't know what you're going to have to be challenged with. Particularly if you're making it in a lab, you can do whatever you want, right? And so it's really about providing broad spectrum coverage from not only what is current and what is ubiquitous on the street, but what someone can cook up with relative ease and use for weaponization. So you just need the ability to be future-proofed, right? You don't know what they're going to do, so you need something that's agile, something that's not in the weeds to still let you know that, hey, this is potentially a fentanyl analog. And if it is something that we have seen and we've developed and we've created reference spectrum for, it'll actually tell you what that analog is as well, as opposed to just that.
Do you also have that same fluidity with possible chemical warfare agents created in the home, for lack of better words, versus something that's lab or government created? Like those slight variations, will it still be like, oh, you got sarin, even though it's, John's version of sarin?
It's a little less easy. Most of those traditional chemical warfare agents don't have as quite a fixed a backbone to play with. So you're often talking about a fundamentally different material. The kind of exception to that is VX. VX does have a little bit more of this sort of synthetic behavior where you have different chains or R groups or functionalities. The device does provide a broad coverage of VX, whether it's RVX or CVX or some of those variations. So we're a little bit more resistant to that. But in terms of algorithmic predictive detection, that is primarily a fentanyl issue. Okay. Even our other synthetic things like synthetic cannabinoids and synthetic cathinones, there's a lot of those out there, but it's tens to hundreds, not thousands. So it's a little bit easier to play that whack-a-mole game of doing a one-for-one spectrum with those threats, as opposed to fentanyl, where you really need a more algorithmic-based approach to it.
We were talking about this morning. We have our morning meetup and everything like that. And we were talking about how, and I know this is not, well, maybe it is on your radar. Is there any use for AI in these types of things where, almost having the ability of like looking through almost like a force multiplier in like libraries? Is that a thing yet?
I'm sure so they have a lot of this sort of functionality in some of the more laboratory grade. So we're starting to see that. We're starting to see a lot of predictive fragmentation models, for instance, of compounds, so that you can basically just generate what would be the mass spectrum for something without running it. There's a lot of technology behind that, even kind of predating AI. As with all things, AI expands our capability to do that much more faster. And so I think there absolutely is a role for that. And
I was just curious.
No, I think there's a huge role for that. It's a very exciting time to be in any technology, right? Everything's growing by leaps and bounds, right? We talked about Doug doing this area monitoring with, again, essentially telegraph wire. And now we have the beacon, which is taking this sort of same concept, and we're putting it on like a tactical cellular network or a tactical Wi-Fi network, right? Something that we didn't even have when I was even in the military, essentially, and that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. So that being able to click into a tactical cellular network, that allows you to basically make your distance almost infinite, right? Like you can have your command post or your monitoring station anywhere you want. Versus the old school where it's Bluetooth with a repeater. You can only be a couple hundred yards away. Like you can monitor and detect from anywhere to anywhere.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, the goal was modularity, as to your point. We don't know what communications package you have. You might have a different communications package than the agency that you're partnered with for the event. And so the goal wasn't to, create a mishmash of it. It was to essentially obviate that problem. So the beacon is, in addition to its battery capabilities, it's providing this comms package or it's providing the ability for you to integrate your comms package into the device, right? So you would just slot your TACnet in. It communicates with a secure web portal instead of your CP. So it doesn't need, connectivity to you. It just needs connectivity to the net. Yeah, and so in that way, you don't have to worry about line of sight. You're not doing repeater networks. You don't need any of that. As long as it can communicate, it's pulled in through that secure web portal, and you can monitor an infinite number of MX908s at an infinite number of locations if you so choose via that one session.
That's what makes it cool, is the sharing of it, right? We can share it with different command posts, whether it be law enforcement, hazmat, or whether it be just the overall view of whoever's out there that we want to share it with. And the other side of the fence is also if I show up and I have 5 beacons and I have 5 MXs show up, I can throw them in the case and I connect them all and work it all the same at the same place. So all of these agencies that come together that maybe didn't have enough money to buy everything, right? Somebody did. They can put them all together without having any problem and mesh them together and use them at that one event.
Yeah, that's a super important point. It's an accessory, and it's not linked to a unit. So any MX908 with an Aero module can be put into any beacon. There's no licenses, compatibility. Your agency can show up with your MX908. You can put it in someone else's beacon. As long as you are providing that comms package, they're all integrated. No syncing, no collaborating. It's just complete modularity. Any unit, any comms package, any beacon.
I was going to ask, that was going to be my final question is like, okay, I get my base level, and I don't want to say that the wrong way, but the base level 908, and then we slap on an Aero, and then we throw it into the beacon. Like, what's the mishmash? And like, even companies, it doesn't matter. That is something. Listen, anybody that's out there, you go into conferences or you want to see this, you got to see this in front of you. You have to go see it because you're not going to believe it. It's almost like, no, they did it.
Yeah,
they did it,
and it's a monitor in a box, so you can just pull it out afterwards too. It's not
and go back
forever
to
a
handheld.
beacon. You can use it in the stand in the same response, right? So if it's used in monitoring, it goes off. You can go to that location and pull it out of the box or pull out the MX908s that you have employed elsewhere that aren't contaminated. And you can use that same tech that you're using to secure it to then respond tactically to the operation. It creates, little forward caches of detectors, essentially,
right.
that are fully usable for the normal course of a hazmat operation.
Mission flexible.
Yeah, it transitions you from one phase to the next very easily.
Well, I know there's going to be a million questions about this, and I certainly cannot answer them all. So I'm going to send them to you guys that actually know the answers. How do they find out more information about this?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to us at 908devices.com. That's a fantastic way. Or also you can email at info@908devices.com.
Awesome. You guys are the bomb.
Thank you for taking some time and showing us about this stuff.
Thanks for having the conversation.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.